Mr. Scott Solomon, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Very, very nice to meet you. I'm happy that you are here today so we can talk about your role as CEO of Operational Security Solutions. And I did listen to a previous podcast that you were on, Scott, and I've done, of course, my homework and some high-level research, and I found it fascinating the evolution of OSS from your website and what I've gathered. It looks like it's a group of former law enforcement, military personnel, federal regulators that have come together and joined forces to tackle this issue, when it comes to financial challenges, banking, with cannabis being a cash only business. So why don't you talk about that evolution to kind of lay the groundwork for today's conversation?
Absolutely. And just as you mentioned, a little over 5 years ago, a group of individuals got together, myself included, and we were looking at ways to help the legal cannabis industry, specifically in California. And we were really a group of people that were on the other side of the table. So people who were law enforcement or regulatory, focused on stopping the illicit trade. And when cannabis went legal in 2017, we tried to stand up a company could help those businesses that wanted to do things the right way. We knew there were security concerns. We knew that there were issues with the regulations. We knew that there were issues with access to banking services. So we tried to stand up a company that brought our expertise together to help those people. It's in the way that I look at it, it's in our best interest and it's in the customer's best interest if we help them to have a compliant program. And that's really how OSS got started.
And I mean, diving a deep further in that, compliance area in that space, it didn't start with overall compliance about kind of like how you're operating today, right? I mean, from what I gathered, it was hardening facilities. So,
Right.
do you want to talk through all that?
Sure. So our initial expertise, as you mentioned, focused on just basic security consulting. So we have some of our founders who actually designed protection systems for nuclear facilities. We had a lot of military experience for penetrating facilities. And so our initial consultative suite included video monitoring, hardening, putting together the security plans that cannabis businesses needed in order to get a license to be able to operate legally. And after a few years, we were listening to our customers and we asked them, how can we help you more? What's your biggest concern? And they immediately brought up banking. And they said, it's tough to run a business when our competition is not taxed as much, when they don't have as many fees. And more importantly, they don't have to do all of their commerce in cash. So we're dealing with companies that had to go pay their taxes with bags of cash. They had to pay their employees with envelopes of cash. And it was extremely antiquated for some really savvy business people that just wanted a level playing field. And so that's when we developed cash in transit, or for the lack of a better term, armored car cash transportation. And we focused on creating a relationship between a financial institution and the client, and doing everything we can along the way to keep that relationship open. We have a strong background in compliance and BSA, AML, or Banking Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering regulatory issues. And so we work with both sides to do everything we can to make them prosper, help them become profitable, and keep that account open.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the position, for a lack of a better term, like the liaison, the person in the middle, that's like you said, strengthening that
Yes.
relationship between the cannabis operator and the financial institution is super important because um, we know that there's high risk on the financial institution side at this point with the federal illegality of cannabis, right? So the large institutions are
Yes.
not as inclined to jump in and to help. So, but there are other financial institutions, I would imagine state chartered banks, credit unions that are member based, payment processors. So things like institutions like that would be more accessible to these operators, but it's like they don't know what they don't know, right? So having somebody in the middle that can connect the dots is very important.
Yes. And you really outlined the three buckets of financial institutions, or of the customers that we try to partner with first. And so the first are state chartered banks. So when you have cannabis legal in any given state, they have the ability to legally bank cannabis accounts. Same thing with credit unions, whether it's the National Credit Union Association's guidelines, or just the fact that credit unions rely on their membership to determine what they will bank and what they won't bank. They can vote and elect to bank cannabis accounts. And then payment processors. So there are some national programs that have very innovative electronic e-based systems that legally enable customers to purchase cannabis, to allow cannabis businesses to have commerce in a transparent and legal manner. So we try to service all three of those groups.
Yeah, no, that's a great breakdown. I appreciate you laying it out that way for the audience. It's super helpful. And I want to ask you, I'm just curious, right? I mean, so you've been in the space for a while now, and we know that it's evident there's a strong need to make the cannabis industry more safe because of the fact that these operators are forced into cash incentive model, right? So how have you seen this problem exacerbate? And what I mean by that is, I mean, when I open up my Twitter feed in the morning, I'm seeing smash and grab robberies. I'm seeing, you know, cannabis retailers, dispensaries getting robbed every second because these criminals know that there's cash on hand at these places. So has the problem gotten much worse? Has it kind of remained consistent? Like, what are you seeing?
I would say that the problems, it's been about the same across the country, but there are pockets of activity, generally where there is more political unrest, where cannabis businesses are targeted. But I wouldn't say that it's only them. It's really, as you mentioned, any business that's cash intensive, any business that is attractive from the position of people who could make entry into that business, could gain something that could easily turn around or to get value out of. And it just like an Apple store, for example, is another easy target. But we've really seen a desire within the cannabis community to be smarter, and we want to evolve with them. We know that cash isn't going to be the only medium forever. There's a Safe Banking Act out there, and I think it's gone to the Senate, 6 times or so, but every time it kind of flounders and stalls. But I mean, we all have hope. We want that to pass. We want some measure like that to pass. But in the meantime, we all have to look at ways of being smarter. And so there are measures like facility hardening, which we do have a longstanding expertise in. There are smarts. There are other operational procedures that these businesses can employ that minimize the amount of product or cash on hand, so they're not as vulnerable.
No, that's great. And I'm glad you brought up safe banking, right? And how it's been presented in the Senate 6 times now. I think Morgan Davis, who I've had on, she's dubbed the phrase, it's the cannabis, or it's the chew toy of the cannabis industry, as she put it, right?
Right.
What's been the progression with that as of recent? So, I see on Twitter talks about, Booker and how he potentially has blocked it because of the real focus on social equity, right, and leading with that. So from your understanding, what has happened with safe banking and where is it at now?
So I'd love to say that I'm the greatest expert with safe banking, especially because we deal with part of the problem that the act is trying to address. But I'm not. I'll fully admit that I don't know all of the details within it, but I do know that, like a lot of acts trying to go through Congress, it's one that gathers political attention. So anything that can be levered that much is going to have opposing sides fighting over it and trying to include what benefits their political agenda the most. And if you really look at the bare bones of the Safe Banking Act from 3 years ago, at least, it was straightforward. It was simple. And it really focused on allowing these businesses to have the full suite of banking services, just like their neighbors, just like the grocery store next door or the department store on the other side of the street. It wanted to open up more services so that they had a level playing field to prosper in those communities. And now I can see more things being added to it. And I can also see the opposition stalling it because it doesn't include the political elements that they want.
Right. And I know there's been talks like, it's to stand on its own, right? Like, why bake it into other legislation as and just let it sit, let it be its own bill. But I don't know. I mean, I think, like, to your point, any attention is good at this point, right? And we'll take it, and we
Yes.
need to capitalize on that attention when it's happening, because as we know, there's so many distractions in this world today with everything going on. It's easy that can get lost.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on how the industry overall can ensure that they're leading with compliance first? And I asked that because I talked with Rose Elliott previously, and that episode will have published by the time this goes live. And she talks about, like, how if you start with compliance and you really focus on that from the state and then local and municipality level, because there's all included in that, and then when eventual federal legalization comes, there's going to be federal compliance. If you can crack that nut early, it will solve for a lot of other problems down the road, including interstate commerce, which I thought was very interesting, of course, because by that point you'll have the data and the know how to kind of get around or not get around, but to navigate the different compliance regulations within state by state. So, long-winded background to ask you the question: what is your thoughts? Like, how can the industry be more compliant thinking as they continue to progress in this industry?
Sure. So, like any highly regulated industry, there are a lot of regulations. America is somewhat unique in the world in that we are transparent. We want to share with our citizens and our businesses the rules, the laws. We don't hide them. We don't have secret laws, regulations that we don't let people know about, and then we try to penalize them later. So, especially with cannabis, there are bureaus of cannabis control, Department of Cannabis Control, and a lot of state-based and local agencies that put a lot of work into coming up with a framework. And in essentially every instance that I've seen, those organizations reached out to the public. They reached out to the concerned citizens, but they reached out to the businesses that wanted to thrive in the industry, and they gathered input. So it was an open process in which they took the feedback from everybody and created a set of rules. And so, in my opinion, it's relatively easy to see the areas and the steps that are needed to have a compliant program. It's also relatively open as far as the number of consultants and legal counsel who are out there that are available to businesses. And if you can be compliant starting in your hometown at the local level and then follow the state rules, I think that you're going to be in a strong position with any federal or national legalization.
Mm-hmm. Scott, what are some other security and compliance challenges that you're seeing cannabis operators are facing today?
One of the biggest challenges that we're seeing is really on the banking side. And so when a bank forms a relationship with a cannabis business, there's a lot of communication that's needed. There's a lot of monitoring that takes place. And there are several companies out there right now that have tools, that have software programs that help set up the business, that help set up the accounting side of it, and that monitor transactions. And as long as there's a free and open flow of communication between that business and the bank, it's relatively easy to keep that account open. But that does take work. It does take a certain skill set in a business. And when we're talking about a cannabis business, you could have somebody who is a farmer, for the lack of a better term, but somebody who is a cultivator that's very passionate about the medicinal benefits of their product. And they go into an industry where the accounting rules are punitive, where the penalties and the taxes and the fees can become overwhelming. And then you have a financial institution where you're trying to have e-commerce is very attentive and constantly asking questions. So I think that if these businesses have an open line of communication, if they open their books, if they try to share as much information as possible, they have the best chances of remaining compliant.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. What is OSS focused on for the remainder of 2022 and beyond?
Right. OSS started in California and really grabbed a large part of the market share in California in a short period of time. And that's definitely our headquarters. It's where we have the strongest relationships, both with banks and with cannabis businesses. But we recently opened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we want to have bicoastal operations. The goal of our Philadelphia operation is to service Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Maryland, immediately without very little stretch. But of course, we want to go up into New England and further down the mid-Atlantic coast because a lot of those states are more progressive, and we're seeing adult use cannabis passing in many of them here very recently. Mm-hmm. So we want to stand up that facility. We want to expand our partnerships. We have a few financial institutions that are already on board. We have a few cannabis clients that are expanding into those areas. And we want to do everything we can to replicate that model from California on the Eastern Seaboard. Second, or I guess along the same lines as that geographic expansion, OSS is looking at smarter ways of servicing the industry. Just like when we listened and started the armored car transport, we're seeing that our customers want smart safes. They want cash recyclers. They want ATM services. They're looking at ways to be quicker, be smarter, have less burden on their employees, less of a security risk on their employees, and ways that they can essentially expand their revenue streams. And if they're able to put a smart safe in their dispensary, for example, it's going to minimize the amount of cash on hand, keep that employee safe. It's going to reduce the possibility of internal theft, and it's not going to be as attractive to a thief or somebody on the outside that's looking to grab a bunch of cash at a vulnerable business. And the e-payment methods that we're seeing, just over the past year, there's probably 3 or 4 new systems that we have a lot of faith in that don't use Visa, that don't use MasterCard and those pain points for the federal regulators, but they use ACH wires and other methods that are still extremely transparent. There's a lot of enhanced due diligence that goes into the system, but once you're in those systems, you're able to transact e-commerce just as if you were buying things through a website on your laptop.
Right. Well, no, that's really interesting, and I appreciate you sharing, what y'all are focused on in the coming months and even throughout the next couple of years. And congratulations on, the Philadelphia expansion. Sounds like there's a lot of opportunity, as you mentioned, to service, that whole East Coast as more states come online. Absolutely. Well, Scott, anything else that's top of mind for you that we maybe haven't touched on, or something that's just really, that you're wanting to discuss or leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Sure. And OSS, we do have the specialty in serving highly regulated markets. OSS is able to really service all businesses. So we know that we have a lot of partners in the cannabis space that have more traditional, conventional businesses. And OSS has actually made that transition from starting in highly regulated markets and then moving into standard business services. So OSS is really one of those partners that can work with a business. It doesn't matter what their business line is. We love servicing ATMs. We love servicing standard cash movements, but we also have the ability to work with them to find ways to become more profitable. So we're just really excited to be in the industry and moving to both coasts.
That's great. No, thank you for sharing that. And where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to get in touch and learn more about OSS and the services that y'all offer?
Sure. Our website is opsecsolutions.us. So it's short for Operational Security Solutions, or OPSEC Solutions with an S at the end, .us. And on the website, they can find the entire suite of services. They can provide information to get our solution briefs that talk about different business verticals that we have. And they, of course, can get in touch with the customer service representative that can get them started.
Awesome. Scott, it's been a pleasure. Really appreciate you coming on and talking about OSS, being one of the leading providers in risk management and compliance services to support the cannabis industry. Appreciate it, man. Let's do it again real soon as the industry continues to evolve and your company continues to grow.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's always great talking with you.
Absolutely. Yes. And thank you all for listening. Bye.
Bye.